Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this workshop on creating an academic poster. My name is Kieran, and this is my colleague.
Hi, I'm Christine. And we are part of your English support tutors at the Manchester campus.
All right, so we're here today to help you to create engaging, amazing looking posters for your course. All right, so let's get into it then. Okay, so we are going to be looking at a few different things today. We are going to be looking at the idea of academic posters. We're going to be looking at how to, sorry, what the content and the presentation should be of the posters, making sure that we are planning it correctly so that it has the required results. And then actually, we're going to get into the technical part of looking at how we physically can do it in PowerPoint, focusing on making sure the layout is perfect, making sure that the background is engaging and is not affecting the image too much. Also, we're going to have a look at making sure that our images look good and that they are the right size and the right quality. And then we will look at how we can get the text onto the image and how it can be exciting and engaging and things like that. And then last of all, we'll look at the final bits of preparation you should do before your poster is ready. Okay, I think everybody's excited and ready to go. So let's begin.
Okay, let's get started with that. So the next slide is what is an academic poster? So here's an example of an academic poster. And as you can see, what the title of this poster is in very large text, and it's all about grammar. So we know immediately at first glance this poster is all about grammar. And here it's giving us some context about grammar. And next part of it is looking at why grammar is essential. Of course, clarity and precision, effective communication, reading comprehension, writing skills. And then right at the bottom, it continues with vocabulary and standardization. So here's an example of an academic poster focusing on grammar. Okay, so we have more academic posters, and yeah, let's get into them.
Okay, so if you can see here on the screen, we have two more academic posters, and they are very similar in that they are both visually engaging. So in the one on the left, sorry, on the one on the left, you can see that there is a nice color balance there. We've got some images that really grab your attention, and then the text is split up into different sections. Whereas the one on the right is a little bit different, but it still has some of those same design ideas. So big, bold text to get your attention, and then a little bit of extra text underneath to add some ideas. All right, so that is what we should be aiming at, and that is what we're hoping to make by the end of the of our workshop today. Okay.
So academic posters will contain a lot of information, but they can also be very aesthetic and pleasing to the eye. So we want to make sure that these look attractive and are easy to read while containing very important information. All right, so let's get into what is an academic poster itself. So basically, it has a visual overview of your information you're trying to portray, and it has a concise summary. So unlike your essays, where you have lots and lots of text on it, it's going to have short information in forms of bullet points, summarized information, and easy, quick to read. Okay, it's going to be focusing on your main points of the information that you're trying to convey. In this case, we're looking at what is the rule of the law, and we will focus on all the main points we want to cover by making that very bright, very bold, and easy to stand out. It will also have a detailed illustrated abstract on the side as into what is this poster about, and clarifying it in a summary that's easy to read, easy to understand, and not going to overwhelm you with a lot of information. Thank you. So Avoid writing a lengthy essay on the poster. I know we want to convey as much information as possible, but keep it brief, summarize, and focus on your main points.
Okay, so thank you very much for that, Christine. So you mentioned there that you should focus on your main points. So before you even start designing your poster, you should think about what is the information that you want to include, and then try to divide it up into 3 different sections. So they should be essential, helpful, and additional. So your essential information is the information that absolutely must be on your poster. Okay, so this should be in big, bold text that everybody can read. Now, the other information, the essential one, is more what it would be good for the reader to know. So it's not completely essential, but the story does make sense without it. Okay, and for the essential information, that is stuff that would be nice to include, but that is only possible if you have a little bit of space left over at the end. Okay, so focus on what really needs to be included, and then the other information can be added later on. Okay, so let's have a look next at audience focus and core idea. Okay, so when you're thinking about your poster, you need to decide who your audience is. Okay, so who are you aiming your message at? Is it adults, children, other academics, the general public? So the answer to this will affect the content that you're going to include and the style that you will have for it. Okay, so do you need to explain subject-specific terms and ideas? Yeah? So there is going to be some vocabulary that you've learned on your course. If your audience is other academics, there's no real need to explain that information. But if your audience is the general public, you may need to think about giving little definitions or meanings for those words.
So, if it's for a general public that you're writing for, you would want to avoid layman terms, or you would want to include layman terms that makes it easy for everybody to understand. You want to focus on making sure it's clear, it's concise, and it's easy to follow. If it's more of an academic standpoint, then you, of course, would use vocabulary that is particular to that field of the poster that's related to. Okay, so always keep your audience in mind when creating it, and make sure you are designing your poster to suit the needs of the audience around you.
Okay, so one of the most important things you need to think about with your poster is, because it is a visual medium, you need to make sure that your visuals, your images, are really popping on the poster. Okay, so there are some advantages and some disadvantages that come with using visuals, but the most important thing is that your visuals need to convey a message. Okay, so we have this phrase in English that what is it again? Yes, pictures speak 1,000 words. So to save you writing 1,000 words, why not include an image that really conveys that idea? Okay, so let's have a look at these images that we have on the screen. So these images here are trying to convey a message. So what do they mean to you? Okay, so maybe just pause the video for a second, have a little think what idea is trying to be conveyed to you here. All right, that's awesome. I'm sure we had some great ideas there. Lovely stuff. So, um, basically from those 6 steps that we had on the screen, and then we had the final result of a bowl full of fruit, we could suggest that the idea there is, let's make a fruit salad. Okay, So you've saved a few hundred words from explaining it, and it is also nicely attractive as well for the person looking at it. Okay, so remember, symbols are really, really helpful here for you.
Okay, so we can use icons to also symbolize what we're trying to say. Remember, the size of a poster is generally between A4 and A3 size, so it's not a massive canvas that we have. We want to choose our images that can convey an impact, easy understanding all at once without giving too much of confusion. So another way to also use images are by the use of icons. And icons is that something isn't something that represents something else. So basically, what icons can you use to represent to the public? Here we have a mixture of three different icons, and can you see they follow in sequence? There's a cloud, there's some wavy lines, and then we have a person holding onto an umbrella, struggling to stay afloat. So if you were to put all these three icons together, they do tell a story. You can assume the cloud is giving off wind, illustrated by the wavy lines, and is causing a windy day for the person who's struggling to stay afloat. So just by the use of these simple icons, they tell an impactful story. So remember to choose your images and icons with great consideration. You want to make an impact. You want to make sure your message of the poster is understood with clarity and stands out, grabs the attention of the reader. Thank you.
Okay, so that was a very good point there, Christine. I think from what we could say from that then is that by including these images, which convey a lot of ideas, we are actually thinking about the idea of amplification through simplification. Okay, so by simplifying your message, you're actually making it easier to understand so that you can then add more information later on. Okay, so we're really ticking along now here. So in the next section here, we're looking further at this idea of visual representation. So the thing that you really do need to remember is, people don't have hours to look at your poster. Okay, so in those couple of seconds that they are looking at it, you need to grab their attention and then to hold it. Okay, so it needs to be visually attractive, but you need to make sure that everybody can see it. All right, so the things we need to focus on then. Okay, so if you see here that the topic should be visible from 3 meters away. Okay, so your topic, either through a big image or through large text, is going to have to be visible to someone maybe on the other side of a room. Okay.
And your text should be readable from 1 meter away. So we want to make sure our images are bright, bold, capturing idea, and we are able to read the text from far away. Because as you're walking, you're going to want to stop and look at your poster. You want to grab the people's attention around you. People are quite busy, generally on their phones, got a lot on their mind. So you want to make sure you put a very impactful image, topic, and text in a clear, accessible way. So focusing on your topic and text, make sure they are easy, identifiable, and stand out from all the other information around them. Okay. So you want to set your slide dimensions according to your poster size and make sure your layout is focusing on these specific points. Of course, always make sure you follow your assignment brief and guidelines as to their guidelines. Also, these are quite general guidelines. However, if your assignment brief says something different, please follow that.
Okay, so as we've mentioned there, it needs to be a two-stage process when you're designing your poster. So it needs to be attractive from far away, but then informative from close up. Okay, so as we can see from these two very good ESL students here, this person has been attracted to the poster from 3 meters away. All right. And she wants to know more about it, because you've created a nice, engaging poster. And then when the person gets close up, then they have learned something new. All right. So you need to make sure that it is good from both of those angles, from far away and then also from close up. All right. So the next thing we're going to have a look at is actually planning our poster. Okay. So as we all know, you don't just have the idea, put it on a poster, print it, and get it out there. There needs to be a bit of planning before it gets printed. Okay. So we're going to talk now about planning our content. So, make sure that you plan a structure for the content. Make sure you break it down into sections. So these sections need to be obvious and kind of standard for an academic poster. Remember, when you're writing an assignment, you're always making sure that it has a linear structure. So an introduction, then a body that has textual analysis, things like that, and then a conclusion. But that doesn't have to be so for a poster. A poster doesn't have to be linear. Okay, you're trying to attract somebody's eye. It doesn't have to be top of the page to the bottom of the page, left to right like that. It can be something a lot more creative.
So also when you're writing the content, you want to make sure you are answering your assignment brief. What was your assignment brief was? If you were to make a poster based on AI, then of course you would follow that with pictures of AI, large bold text talking about AI. You also want to make sure you follow the word count guidelines. So there would be something in your assignments about your word count that you need to follow. Make sure you follow that to answer that correctly. And your references would be it may depend that it could be on the actual academic poster itself. Maybe it could be at the bottom of the poster, or maybe your lecturer will ask for a separate document with regards to your references. However, as always, follow your assignment brief and then you'll be able to draw out your academic poster with that. So we want to make sure we are planning. A very important part of assignments on your academic poster will be to plan it out, sketch it out. Let's have a look at how it's going to be on the academic poster before you start gathering together information.
Okay, so the next thing you need to think about then is the layout. Okay, so as we mentioned, it isn't always top to bottom, left to right, following that kind of structure. This gives you the option now to be a bit more creative, but there still needs to be a little bit of structure. Okay, it can't be kind of chaotic and things like that. So, like you can see on the screen, especially for the one on the left, it's split into 3 columns like that. And the 3 columns are very good at dividing that information up, okay, so into easy to read, manageable chunks. Okay. And the one on the right, although it kind of looks different, has some similarities. It still has 3 columns and the information is still divided up into those columns. Okay, so columns are a good way to go. Okay, and remember that for some blocks of text or some pictures, they can take up 1 or more columns. They don't have to be small enough that they fit in just 1 column. All right, so you're not obligated to do this, but it is a good starting point anyway, as a good way to brainstorm ideas.
Okay, so if you are following this landscape, you want to make sure that people are able to read your information in the correct manner. Okay, because we have lots of different columns. We want them to follow in a logistic and logical way. We don't want them scanning across trying to figure out what's the next column to follow. So we want to make it sure it's easy, simple to read. Okay, so people usually read down columns. So you would start up and then you work your way down. So you try and follow that general idea of reading from up all the way down. Okay, so if you are mixing it up, for example, like here, you can use arrows or numbers to show sequence. Okay, because people be like, okay, there's 1, 2, 3, that's how I should follow. The use of arrows shows direction. It shows which way the eye should follow and what information will be following next. So you could use these arrows also if you're trying to convey images to match the text, if they are not necessarily next to each other. So it's a good way and a systematic way to arrange your information.
So one thing to remember here is that some posters are written in a way so that it doesn't really matter what order you read it in. So it could be something almost like a spider diagram with the topic in the middle and the concepts around the edge. So it may be that you don't really need to read it in a specific order, or it could be something like in photographic order, like almost like uh, in a clockwise way. Okay, so be creative with it, but just make sure that it is, if there is an order to it, that it is obvious, like you said, through arrows or numbers or something like that. Okay, so if you have a look here on the screen, there's a few more different ways that you could plan your layout. So there are lots of possibilities for layout, but maybe think about sketching it out on paper first, just to get a general idea of how it looks, how things are able to fit in here and there and everywhere. And you do need to remember that if you're planning it out on A4, it's kind of easy to understand how you would do it for A4. But if your poster is going to be A3, maybe it's best to sketch it out on A3 as well. Okay. And don't just focus on doing one layout. Try out a few different types just in case there is something that looks more visually engaging.
So when you are able to sketch out your post, it helps you to get a visual representation of how the post will look. You can look at it and amend. You can be like, am I putting too much information? What information am I leaving out? Can I add in an image here to support the text? And it's going to basically be a good way of figuring out which direction you should move forward. Also, you can move information around so it's easy to read. And you can also change your focus by moving text and images along with that. So it's a great way to use different layouts, as Kieran has mentioned, because maybe a horizontal layout is more fitting off the poster style. Maybe you'd like to try a different layout to convey more of an impact. So play around with that until you find a layout that you're most comfortable with.
Hey, great stuff. So now that we've planned our poster, now we need to think about the technical aspects of how we actually design it. One of the best ways to do this is by using PowerPoint. Okay, so in our next section, then we're going to have a look how we get those technical details sorted. So it would be things about layout, color, backgrounds, images, and diagrams, even the font. Okay, so let's have a look now at our focus on size. So if you know that your poster is going to be an A4 or A3 or A2, etc., make sure that in PowerPoint you set up your size to be the size that is going to be your output. Okay. So it is actually very easy to do by just going to the design section at the top of the screen, choosing the slide size, and then choosing the custom slide size and selecting one of the options which we have here on the screen. Okay. So you will find it a lot easier if you design your poster already knowing the size that it's going to come out as. Okay. All right. So there will be a problem, for example, if you design it as A4, but then you print it out in A3, things will be printed in a much bigger way and you may get distortion and things like that. Okay. So you are going to print it in one of the A sizes, almost certainly. So make sure you set it as one of those A sizes at the start.
Okay, so if you're using guides, you would use the view and the show method or option on PowerPoint. And this view has the basic things of a ruler, a guide, and the grid line. So using this will help you determine How are you going to plan out your poster?
Okay, so if you decided to do 2 columns, then by splitting it up into 2 sections, that will sort you out as well. If you're going to have 3 columns, make sure that your guidelines and your rules go into 3 sections, so it becomes much easier to design the layout of your poster. Okay, so in the next section, we need to be thinking about colors. So you need to make sure that your colors really are attractive, but also easy to read and easy to understand.
So we want to focus on making sure our posters are also accessible, so anybody reading it is able to read all information without being overwhelmed. We also want to make sure it also packs a punch or packs an impact. Okay, so we want to make sure we are focusing on the colors. We want complementary colors that we can use to contrast each other. You can focus on colors that intensify each other's colors, complementary colors, and think about the specific color palette you would like to use for this poster.
Okay, so once you have your color sorted, you now need to be thinking about the background of your poster. Okay, so do remember it could be an image on its own. So the background could be an image, or the background could also be a blank color. So the way that you want to do this on a PowerPoint is by going to the Format Background section and then choosing either a picture or a texture fill. This will make sure that it is easy to read and hopefully accessible for everybody who's reading it. Okay, so remember that your backgrounds usually are either something that is plain, colored, or has an image, but the image needs to be subtle so it doesn't distract from the text. Also, ensure that you have some type of contrast. So if your background is white or beige or something like that, make sure that the color of the text offers a contrast to that so that you can clearly see it. Other things you might want to think about are adding transparency to your image. Okay, so if you add transparency to the image, that means that text can be put on top of it or behind it, and it is still readable. And your main objective really is making sure that all text is clear to read and legible.
Okay, so we want to use our images in an impactful way, and one way we can use images are by using photographs. And photographs will add a lot of dimension to our posters. And they also need to be big, okay? Big enough that we could see them from far away. And also they should be clear images. So if you are using a photograph, make sure it is clear and not pixelated. From afar, we want to avoid pixelated images because they won't be clear to the eye and your reader will be left confused as to what this image is about. So we want our photographs to be at least 250 pixels wide. So it is easy to see. Can you see the difference between that image of the eye and the blurry one? Immediately we know it is an eye rather than guessing what the square is about. Okay, so look at the sharpness of the picture now. When it is 1,000 pixels wide, it is clear, it is crisp, and we can easily identify that it is a rabbit with a little flower in its mouth. So for maximum benefit, we would recommend using a photograph that is at least 1,000 pixels wide.
Okay, so when you are selecting your images, make sure that you are choosing the pictures with the highest resolution possible. Okay, all right. So if you can't get it in a high resolution, then it's probably not a good idea to use it. Okay, because it won't be nice to look at when it is finally printed. Okay, so let's go into that a little bit more detail here. Okay. So let's think about how we can actually improve our image resolution. Okay, so photographs must be chosen that they will look okay at the size they will be printed. So small photographs may look fuzzy if they are printed too large. Okay. And also, if you use too large a photograph, the file, if that is too large, that can also cause problems as well. So make sure you just have that sweet spot between quality and file size. Okay. So it is actually possible for you to work out how big your image should be. Okay. So when you've planned it out on paper, you may understand that you need your picture to be 6 centimeters wide, just for example. Okay. So if we're looking at a resolution of 120 dots per centimeter, which is 120 px, that means each centimeter needs that resolution. Okay. So if it's going to be 6 centimeters at 120 dots per centimeter, you will need to find an image that is 720 px. Okay, so when you are trying to find your image, at least have this idea in your mind of how high the resolution will need to be. Okay. All right, so another way we can use images, not just photographs, is to have a look at diagrams.
So diagrams are a great way to add a lot of colorful information in a quick, accessible way to read. And one of the tools we can use to create a diagram is by using PowerPoint. So you can add in a diagram with smart art, okay? So we can have a diagram that says meets targets and is giving you a clear reject or accept. So you can follow it. It's a line diagram for the information. You can also use a smart art to show a cycle of information. And if you want to use other apps, you're more than welcome to do that. Now, diagrams exist in two forms that we would recommend, your PNG or your SVG.
So by using diagrams in those file formats, that will make sure that it includes all of the information that is needed and then is prepared in the correct resolution as well. So that is why we recommend those. Okay, so we've talked about photos, we've talked about diagrams. We also need to think about graphs. Okay, so if you're displaying information, a good way to display it is by using graphs. Now, remember that graphs can be constructed in PowerPoint, but they can also be constructed in Excel. So if your research has been done in Excel, it is actually possible to take the data analysis and then to export it from Excel. So you can copy it from Excel and then it would turn out nicely in your PowerPoint presentation. Okay, but just be careful though, sometimes when you do export from Excel, that you are using the correct paste method. Okay, so if you are using embed, it can be different from when you use link and when you use image. Okay, if you take it from Excel by just using the paste example of image, it will only paste the image itself. Okay, you won't be able to then edit any of the data inside it. Okay. Now, if you want to use a whole spreadsheet, then possibly the best option is to use embed. Okay, so it'll take everything from the spreadsheet and put it into the PowerPoint document. Okay, now another option that you have is a link. Okay, so if you then put that into your PowerPoint, it will provide a link that is ready for you to use. Okay, so maybe experiment with the three options just to make sure that you have the correct graph that you would like.
Now, in order to attract attention from all the information around you, you want to make sure your poster stands out. And one way your poster can stand out is by having a font that is attractive and makes people want to read your poster. So you could use various fonts to get this across. I would say for your main topic, use it in a big bold text, okay? That should be highlighted the most. And then for your subtopics, go into a smaller text size or a different text, just to show the difference between the main topic and then your subtopics. So these are some of the fonts you could use when creating your academic poster. So you could use the serif, New Times Roman. It's generally traditional. It's what we would see in most of the posters around us. If you want to go for something modern and less formal, these are examples of text that you could use. If you want your poster to have a handwritten feel, as in something but authentic, and something but more natural with handwriting, then these are some of the font types that you can use. So please remember, we generally try to stay away from cursive fonts as they are not great for accessibility, and we want to make sure our poster is accessible to all readers and conveys information in a very clear way. So here we go with this interesting text at the bottom. It's decorative. An example of that is fungi. So it's very informal. It's fun. You could use it for accents, but not in a traditional academic poster. So be mindful of the font you choose. Make sure it does convey information, but also that itself is a formal font that is best used in an academic setting.
Okay, so now that we have decided on our font and we know what we're going to write, now we need to think about how we actually format it on the poster. Okay, so there are two ways to add text to our poster. It can either be in shapes or it can be in text boxes. Okay, now there are pros and cons on both sides, but you may want to experiment rather than in using text boxes that you use text in shapes instead, okay? Because from experience, it can make your text look better and more natural, okay? You should also think about setting the colors and the text to make sure that it can be read clearly from a reasonable distance, okay? Other things to think about when you are writing the body text, so the main information, think about the line spacing and think about maybe increasing it slightly just so that it is a little bit easier to read. Okay. Other things you might want to think about are including subtle spaces between paragraphs. Okay. So if you look on the screen, on the left, you've got kind of the traditional way of doing it. And then on the right, you've got a more experimental way of doing it. And just think to yourself, which one looks easier to read? Which one looks more attractive? Okay, so the one on the left has normal line and paragraph spacing. The one on the right has larger paragraph spacing, and then it also has it also has a smaller font, but I think we can all agree that it is slightly easier to read, okay, and more attractive as well. It also seems to fill the box more.
It is easier to read, and can you see it's not so clumped up together? The information is set apart in an easy way. There's space so your eyes can move between the text together rather than all bundled up together. So we want to make sure anyone looking at your academic poster can read the poster and understand all the information in it.
Okay, so now that we have our text and we've added it to the box or to a shape, another thing we might want to think about is adding headlines. Adding headings. Okay, so your headings should be closer to the text to which they relate. Okay, so on the left we have Mary and the Lamb, so a nice little kiddies poem there. So that's how it could appear. But one thing that we want to try and improve is we want to make sure that it looks something a bit more like on the right. So if you see here, we have slightly increased the line spacing and we've slightly decreased the font size. But again, I think you would all agree that it is a little bit easier to read and actually more understandable. Okay. We have also moved the heading slightly closer to the following text, so we know that that text relates to that heading. Okay, we've also put a space between the paragraphs as well, just to make sure that everything is easy to read, easy to understand, and more accessible. Okay, so now let's think about how our final poster should look. So on the screen, we've got some examples here. Okay, would you agree that they are bright, accessible, visually attractive, easy to read, not too much information, not too little information? I think I hear everybody saying yes there, yeah? It's deafening. Yes, 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 yes.
As you can see, there are very definite sections. We can see this is talking about our main topic, and it's going into the green, which has our problem statements. So there's different areas on this academic poster that we can see. Our objectives are very clear. We know as we move down, it's giving us all the information. So it's down, going the way all up, and their uses of pie charts. They're using different images here. There's a table. There's lots of different images to convey different information. Okay, so as we can see, it is bright, it is accessible, and it grabs your attention. You want to look at what's going on in this poster. And if you can focus on this, the market survey, there's very little text and there's a lot more images here. So you don't have to read so much without like scanning through. But if you have a glance, you're able to find all the information that you need is an easy way. So at a glance, you know what this poster is about and it's telling you all the different areas. The next poster, if you have a look, it does say global sourcing shouldn't cost us the earth. And it has a very interesting picture there, Kieran. What do you think about that picture?
Oh, I would agree with you. It is very interesting. Okay. So you may notice there's kind of a subtle kind of image going on where it says shouldn't cost us the earth. We've got a nice circular motif here. Do you think they wanted you to show you that it looks like the earth? That's a correct answer. Yes, it is. So one interesting thing is here, they've gone with a slightly different layout here. They've gone for the clockwise one. So we've started in the top left with number one, then it proceeds into number two in the top right, then it goes to number three in the bottom right, and then number four in the bottom left. And then there is kind of a concluding phrase in the bottom left. Now, it doesn't really follow the normal rules of going from left to right, top to bottom, but we know the order in which we're supposed to read it because there are lines with arrows on them which tell us how we should do it. Okay. Also interesting here is we do have a nice large image in the middle which really draws your attention, and then it leads off into the text box where you can learn more if you would want to. Okay, so those are both nice visually attractive posters. And now let's have a look at a couple more.
So here we have a more traditional academic poster, and this is focusing on academic research. We can see the topic sentence is nice and bold. Looking straight at it, we know what this is about. And then a subtopic or definition is under it, also in a smaller font size, but also grabbing our attention. And there's a very colorful palette going on here. And you can see the graph also mimics the color palette. So if you are using graphs, don't think that they have to be in boring colors. They can also be in bright fun colors to match your poster. So yeah, we have a very, very basic understanding. It follows from top to bottom, going all the way from left to right. So clever use of imagery here to grab your attention, but this is more of a text-based academic poster. It's quite heavy on text. It's giving you information about academic research. So it's giving you a lot more explanation than the previous posters that focused on images. So that example of your text posters, a text focused poster.
Okay, and if we have a look at the one on the right, it is almost completely different, but it still has the same effect of being visually attractive. So at the top of the page, we have a nice, large, heavy title, so we know exactly what the poster is going to be about. We have some deliberate sections here with headings on them, so we know what each section is about. We have some nice, large images that draw you in, and once you have been drawn into them, then you can then focus on the text here. It is quite similar to the other one in that it is quite heavy on the text, but if you're not particularly interested in the introduction, then you just want to know more about the species, then guess what? You can look at species A, species B, and focus on the results there. Okay. So they all are very, very different, but they all follow those rules of being visually attractive, grabbing your attention, and then adding information later on. Okay, so are we done, Christine?
Thanks. So.
She thinks so, but we're not done just yet because there is at least one other thing we need to think about before we move on, and that is the actual printing stage. Your poster is ready to go, but is it? Well, we're going to find out. So once you have completed it in PowerPoint, you're going to have to export it from PowerPoint into the PDF format. Okay, so that it's ready to print. When you do get to the printing stage, maybe do a couple of test runs first. You may print it out. You may get right up to your deadline and print it out, and then shock, horror, it looks a bit bad. Well, make sure that you do a practice run beforehand. Maybe print out part of your poster, to see if it looks okay when it comes to the final printing. Okay. Because if you're doing it for example, in A3, you might want to do a little test in A4 just to see if it looks all right before looking at the full size.
So I would also recommend printing it out, as Kieran said, to make sure everything is aligned properly. The colors are the same as you imagine them. It's because sometimes a color may be slightly different on screen, and when you print it out, the color is not what you anticipated. So it's a good way to check that everything is still complementary or as sharp in contrast as you would like it. Just a good way to just make sure everything's aligning correctly. Because when you print, that's when you may find out some text boxes are not aligning or an image is placed incorrectly. So a good way is just to have a physical copy, have a quick scan, check all's okay, and then move on to the next stage.
Okay, that is very good advice there, Christine. Yeah, I think on a couple of occasions we've done the same thing. We've had our poster perfect on PowerPoint, and then when it came to printing, we noticed that the colors were different. It was formatted a little bit differently, and we needed to print out a few more different copies just to make sure that it looks all right. So learn from our mistakes, and yours will be just fine. Okay. So Christine was correct in that we've nearly finished. So just before we go, let's talk about some other things you can do to improve your poster designing skills in the future. So if you're looking for other resources into how you can fully utilize PowerPoint, then I suggest that you follow this link that is on the screen here. Okay, so this is a page that has been designed by Microsoft itself to show you how you can create a presentation in PowerPoint.
This is such a great resource because it has a video that you can click in, you can watch, and will take you by step process of how to create a presentation. And if you see on the left, directly under share and collaborate, it says give a presentation. So that will have practical advice for you to incorporate when you are creating your presentation. I would recommend going through it, have a look, and see what new skills you can incorporate the next time you have an academic poster.
And if you are looking for a little bit more help, we would suggest that you go to the University of York's webpage, where they have a lot more resources on designing a poster that has a powerful point. Okay, so we're trying to make our PowerPoint as brilliant and as exciting as possible so you can get a good mark. So that is basically the end of our presentation for today. So I know I'm sure you loved it. But if you do have any feedback for us, make sure you scan the QR code that is on the screen. It will take you to a Google form where you can leave a little bit of feedback on that.
Thank you for attending this workshop on how to create an academic poster. I hope you have learned some valuable tips and look forward to incorporating them in your work and showing off to your classmates and amazing you and making your lecturer amazed when they see your poster. As always, I'm Christine.
And I am Kieran, and we are your English support tutors on the Manchester campus. So if you do ever want to get in touch, make sure you email that address that is on the screen. If you can't read it, it is English support _ Manchester, wh@esl.ac.uk. I'm sure you will agree, a very easy to remember and easy to write down email address.
Yeah, please feel free to reach out to us with regards to any academic English support. We offer sessions in person and online. If you want to come in by yourself, that's great. If you want to bring in a friend or two, that's more than welcome. We are here to assist you. So please drop us an email.
So we can help you with many different things. For example, presentation skills. So I'm sure you will agree that we did really well presenting it today. And if you are going to give a presentation in the near future, don't be afraid to come and meet us, and we can give you maybe some strategies for reducing your stress and increasing your confidence when speaking to a room of people. We could also help you with your assignment skills as well. So if you want to make sure that your, I don't know, your grammar and your vocabulary is being used to its highest potential, then really do get in touch. We can also have a look at some other academic skills as well, like reading skills, about making sure that you really are reading efficiently and getting everything that you need from your books and articles. We can also have a look at listening skills as well. Okay, so do remember that we can help you either online or in person on the campus as well. So we are available through Microsoft Teams. So a very good way to get in contact with us is through the email on the screen. Okay, so I don't know about you, Christine, but I've enjoyed myself helping people today. What about you?
It's been a really good workshop session, and I hope that you watching along had just as much fun as we did.
All right, so I think we've had just about enough fun for today. So I think we should say goodbye to the guys. All right, so everyone, thank you very much for coming and see you next time.
Goodbye.